Hi, I'm Mark Stoudemire, and welcome to our second season of Get to the Joke. Our guest today is Mary Radzinski, one of my favorite comedians in Philadelphia. She is one of the most talented and unique and hilarious comics that I've ever met. You can check her out with her debut stand-up album called Discomfortable, which I was actually at the live recording for, which was an amazing experience. And she's also one of the two hosts of the very funny podcast, Are You My Podcast? So please sit back and enjoy this conversation between Mary and myself. I do want to apologize to Mary for the glare on the screen. And if you don't mind, please subscribe to this channel. So without further ado, let's get to the joke.
I was standing in a long line, and this woman behind me, just making conversation, being polite, was like, "So, do you have any kids?" Like 5 years ago or so, I would have confidently answered, "Not yet." Now I'm just like, "Not anymore." I don't like small talk.
Hey.
Hey there. Well, how are you?
Good. How are you doing? It's great to see you. It's been a long time since I've actually seen you. So, how's everything going with you? How's Mark? How's everybody?
Oh, you're so sweet. I mean, everything is garbage, per everybody else. But no, it's weird. It's totally weird. And if I'm being very honest, I feel like I'm so removed from stand-up right now and joke writing.
Yeah.
That I was excited to talk to you because I'm like, maybe it'll wrangle something loose again, because it's just been such a weird time. You know what I mean?
I know. Well, I kind of want to start out kind of paint a picture of who you are and kind of want to get kind of an idea how this girl from small town Albion, New York, or Albion, New York, with
Albion, you got it.
With a stutter, is now probably one of the most sought after comics in Philadelphia. And I don't how many people, when you were little would have thought that you would be public speaking, or forget the comedy part, just doing public speaking as a way to earn a living. Like, would anybody bet that on you?
No. In fact, it's funny you say that because I feel like a lot of people wouldn't have gambled on the fact that I would even leave my mother's side from Albion, New York, let alone move away. But yeah, totally. I want to say happenstance. I always loved comedy. I always loved, even being a little kid and I don't know if a babysitter wasn't paying attention and Eddie Murphy Raw was on, like Showtime or something. But I always loved that, making people laugh. Yeah. And, my father, God bless him, he's a sweet 82-year-old man.
Okay.
He is the funniest. He's not quite the same, but, growing up, he, just the driest wit and the best sense of humor. And I just remember if you went to church or you went to anywhere, you'd want to be near him because he would have something really smart and clever to say, just kind of under the radar. And that's kind of where I think I got my sense of humor, just dry wit versus I'm not looking for attention. Yeah. I'm not looking to hold, have a crowd around the water cooler paying attention to me, but just observationally finding the funny things around you, what I mean? And I remember hanging out at friends' houses and stuff later in my school years and realizing that oh, they don't laugh all the time. We were always everything is to make each other laugh, and not obnoxiously, but I just didn't realize that some people weren't like that. You know, it was sort of weird.
Well, let me ask you, what in a chicken and egg situation, what came first? The fact that you became aware that you had the ability to make other people laugh, and not just your friends, but people who are unlike you, or the fact that stand-up comedy was a possibility for a career, or that profession existed? What was first, if you can remember?
I think just, God, this, so humble over here. I think it was that I was funny, that I said I was able to get a reaction out of just saying what I was thinking in my head during any given situation. And even like my aunt actually jokes one time, this is so stupid, but that I was like a toddler in my crib. And she was the one who came up in the morning and said, like, oh, what does my sweet girl want for breakfast? And I said cheeseburger, French fries. And then I waited because I knew that wasn't a breakfast food or something. Like, I was, I mean, that's, that should be my closer right now with what I'm working with. But yeah, no, I think it was just that. And also my appreciation of people that could make me laugh made me want, or just that were funny, you know? It's like, if I had to get stuck in an elevator with someone, there are a few people it wouldn't be a bad time, because they were just so funny.
Because when I watch your stand-up, it's very much, the jokes are about things that you've experienced within the last, 5 years. You don't really, I've never, I was at your album taping and I've listened to jokes online. I saw the stuff you sent me, but it's like, I don't hear too much about, you don't poke fun really about your parents or where you grew up or anything like that. So, kind of like, was your mom kind of funny in her own right? Or like, you have like a little bit about your mom that applies to your sense of humor now?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's funny because I would say my dad was the one we always sort of paid attention to and waited for the line, My mom, I have to say, is I think she was so underappreciated by myself from a comedic sense growing up, because she was the one that was home all the time nagging me to do things. We didn't really have, I think my dad, because he did work away for part of the week, that it's like, we treated him like company versus my mom was like, but in my, since I've been an adult, I mean, she's legit my best friend, and her sense of humor, now mind you, she grew up on a farm. She had a horse. I mean, she never left her hometown until she was 60. And she has the best sense of humor, the most, and she would be like blushing if I said this, but like, a well-placed C word will make her giggle to the point of crying. Yet she bakes pies and bar soap and stuff. But she has such a developed, her appreciation. Like we have the exact same sense of humor, which is, I don't know how that happened. I don't know, but I will say that I know what to do to make her laugh or lighten a scenario with her, very quickly. It's sort of weird.
Now, when your father hears you tell jokes, first, has he heard you tell jokes?
He has. He's in a scenario of a dementia at this point. But mind you, and he knows who we are and stuff. But he has not been to anything in a long time. He was at my first ever stand-up show. And I think he was at Helium once or twice, possibly. So he definitely has seen me do stand up, and he's seen it on the computer and stuff like that.
Does he know when you, because the way you describe him, I think you just mentioned that your kind of sense of humor comes from his kind of style, but does he recognize that the kind of way that you tell jokes would be almost like, hey, that come from me? Like, you sound like I would sound if I was on stage.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, years ago, we would talk about that, too, because, again, with his age and everything, he would quote, Henny Youngman jokes and some of those one-liners and some of those very short, just not obvious, under the radar, zings. that was kind of my goal, and so we did sort of talk about that. I mean, like he'd always talk about like the one joke of Henny Youngman, like it was about a guy. He walks up and this homeless man asks him, he's like, "Sir, can you spare some change? I haven't eaten in 3 days." And the guy's like, "Well, you got to force yourself." And then just keeps walking, like just like a twisted, dark one-liner. That's
awesome.
what we both love. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, so I guess like not to skip ahead too much, because I kind of want to keep talking about kind of like this growing up situation. But what were your parents' thoughts? Because you went to Syracuse, which is an excellent school. You got a degree in marketing, which is a great degree. You became a pharmaceutical rep, and I know you got laid off, and that kind of gave you the push to do stand-up. But what were your parents' thoughts when you kind of approached them as like, I'm gonna kind of do comedy full time now? Were they on board right away, or were they like, we just spent a lot of money on a degree from Syracuse kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I could see the disappointment in their eyes. But no, it's funny because I will say I did start stand up late. So I was a pharma rep for 12 years. So I think I spent enough time. When I say I started late, you know what I mean? Like I wish I look at the kids in their early 20s, but but I was 29 when I started, and by that time I had done okay. You know what I mean? I got out of my small town. I was making a good living, and I think it was scary for them, and I don't know if my dad was really on board because again, generationally, he was like, "What are you doing?" But even now, I mean, what am I doing? I don't know. I'm probably the way this goes, I'm gonna go be a vaccine pusher. Like I don't know what to do, but I got laid off. So it was the second. I had been laid off twice with the company, and they offered a severance package, and I was like, I just want to give this a shot, So I think I was a bit of a wimp with. I didn't just if I hadn't been laid off, I wonder would I have gone for it. Now, mind you, I started stand up while I was a pharma rep. So for about 5 or 6 years, I was doing both. And to be honest, I think I was more productive when I had both gigs than when just stand up. So,
so I kind of want to address this stutter, and I relate to that because I also had one and still have it. But do you? How do you overcome, not overcome the technical, but how do you, I think the thing that really stuck out to me was, and I think I'm trying to find a weird way to address this, so I'm going to come straight on and ask you. It hurt me to hear that your family would make fun of you because of the stutter. I get kids in school do it, but now your family members doing it. What kind of walk me through what that was like? I mean, and how did you get then from there? And I'm talking about the technical speech therapy and all that. How did you get from there to stand up? How did you, in talking in front of a group of people, how did you make the mental hurdle for people that might hear this who have speech issues or verbal issues? How did you mentally get from being made fun of from your family to telling jokes on a stage and being very vulnerable and being by yourself up there?
Yeah. No, and it's funny because I will say that the family member who poked at me, I don't even think that, okay, to answer the short version is I think I was lucky with the actual stutter that it didn't last for more than a year or two. It was young, like kindergarten, first grade. And I'll be honest, I never went to speech for it. Nobody, which is like, hey guys, hey Mary's parents, what were you guys doing? But I have no idea how it corrected itself, if you will. So it was sort of, in a weird way, I didn't have a lot of attention on it. And I don't think I was doing a whole lot of talking during that time other than when I was at home anyway, And if I'm being completely honest, because I mean, when I hear that, it's like it's like the origin story of this triumphant, But I wish it was that dramatic. I literally think that I ended up, it ended up not fixing itself. I don't know what that means, but I didn't have it for more than my early grade school years. And then, I think by the time stand up and all that public speaking, it wasn't even
such a non-issue.
Yeah. I will say, as a pharma rep, when this is so dumb, but people always would say to me, like, we'd have to do presentations and stuff at work and meetings and stuff. And I almost didn't pass my pharma rep, whatever, because I would have panic attacks. I didn't like to speak in front of the group.
Yeah.
They like sent me down to the corporate nurse's office for a beta blocker or whatever, because I was literally having a panic attack.
Wow.
So I do not like public speaking, and maybe that in some weird way goes back to my childhood. Stand up to me is totally different though, and I don't know why that is. It's a power thing, and
Can I ask you, in times where you have bombed miserably, or the audience is turning on you in a hostile way, does the stutter come back?
No.
Okay.
No. And I'm really lucky.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It kind of intrigues me. I made a note here. Is kind of your mom, and it strikes me because I listen to your comedy. I almost want to say your comedy is a marriage between your dad's sense of delivery of a joke and kind of your mom's personality.
Oh, that's so interesting. I love what you said about the overlap of whatever my jokes, the product of my parents, because I do feel that when you say it like that. I do think that it's so funny. You're so good at this. You just nailed that, because that sort of Stepford, the lifestyle, I think I've maybe coming from a small town and not being sure of myself and being insecure about just various things, did sort of influence the fact that number one, you hit the nail on the head. I felt like an imposter the whole time I was selling pharmaceuticals. And as a pharmaceutical rep, I felt like I never belonged. I was never salesy. I didn't know how to be around sort of, again, like just sort of very confident, almost overconfident, good-looking people with these perfect homes at the end of the cul-de-sac and the kids and the sports, and I was always single, and I think my comedy was a shield, or like just being, and this is awful to say because I met wonderful people. Like I'm literally one of my absolute best friends I met in pharma. She's no longer doing that either, but like I'm godmother of her first son, and I met wonderful people. Yeah. But for the there is a stereotype that is a stereotype because it exists of the type of people that are in that industry, and I guess I just didn't know any better, and it wasn't like, it was more like, oh, do this job and then you'll make money, and that will allow you to do the thing you really want to do, which is comedy. Like that's all I wanted, was to have a job that didn't work the weekends, didn't work at night, and I could work on my jokes. And I never felt like I fit in, but I always did well. And I don't think other people thought that, because I used a shield. Like people found me entertaining. And I used that as a superpower in that world, I think. And I don't know if I totally went off, and
No, that's fine. This is all good. No, this is all good. Can I ask you, when you were in middle school and high school, did you belong there? Did you felt like you belonged, and not just your group of friends, but like, you know what I mean? Were you part of the yearbook staff?
In that, again, it goes contradictory to what I hear. I did.
Okay.
I actually, senior superlatives, I was voted most popular.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
And now, mind you, I graduated in a class of like 150, so it wasn't all that difficult, I don't think. But it was, sort of that, you hear a lot with stand-ups, like the introvert, But I think I I like to be liked. And I think that need was apparent even, mostly when I was a kid. And so I had a lot of groups of different friends that weren't necessarily friends with each other. So it was kind of like, learning to speak multiple languages and just keeping the peace. That was my goal.
Okay. You're this extremely confident woman on stage, and you kind of defy the stereotypes. You kind of present yourself, I feel like, as someone who may make pies or their own bar of soap, but can slip in a very polite cunt, and everybody is fine, very hilarious about it. So is this your mother's upbringing? Was your mother kind of this strong, womanly presence in your life, or where did this kind of like, not being kind of like the doting woman on the man's arm, like you went into stand up, you didn't marry into kind of like where did this kind of being like this very like strong, independent, hilarious woman who can hang with any crowd and it doesn't gender doesn't even matter at this point. That's how good you are. Where did that come from? That kind of personality you have.
It's funny, and first of all, lots of kind words here, Mark. I'm not used to it, but I thank you for saying all that. As you're saying these words, it's funny because I'm asking myself, where did it come from? And in a weird way, I feel like growing up in the small town, even though I couldn't go spend the night at a friend's house until literally 8th grade. I was like, I had separation anxiety with my mom. I was a baby. I mean, I cried every day for the first 2 years of school. My nickname was the girl with the sad eyes because I probably had an actual, totally diagnosable separation anxiety. Like when I looked it up, it's like, oh, they think one of the parents will die. And I had all these rules anyway. And saying all that, I do think that I used I always knew I was going to live away from home, which is weird though, because my mom would be like, no, you're not. And even the fact that I wanted to go to college and live away, they were like, that's probably not going to happen for her, but I always knew that my time there was sort of temporary. And so I think in a weird way, I think I became the opposite of my mom, who got married at 20, stayed home, didn't, she had a college degree and but she decided to stay home. And she was a strong woman and is a strong woman, but in a weird way, I think that I didn't want the traditional female life. Like I just knew from a very young age I didn't want that, and all I can think of is that I saw her having it or people in my small town. And I think that knowing that and knowing that I didn't necessarily want to be married with kids at a young age gave me a little bit of a freedom that maybe my friends didn't have or feel, and that also, I think even young, I was kind of one of the guys with my sense of humor. So that was another, like, I knew that if I could make people laugh or be interesting to be around, it wouldn't matter if I had a close friend right near me or not, and it was sort of like armor. I'm not sure if I answered your question properly.
No. You kind of did, and actually I might come back. Let me. I'm trying. You just said something there I want to touch on, but I'm trying to go back. Oh yes. So you grew up in this small town bubble where all the women acted pretty much the same way, all the men acted pretty much the same way. Was there a role model, or what was your outlet to know, like, there were other people, there are other women that weren't like the women that you're seeing every day in your life? Did you have like an aunt that would come into town and kind of like a whole different personality, or was there a TV character even maybe, and you like kind of attached to them? Where was this? How did you know that there could be another way to be a woman outside of kind of a homemaker kind of role?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I'm not sure I could narrow it down to one, one thing, it's funny that my mom's sister lived out of town. She never lived around when I was growing up. So she would swoop in. And even just the idea that someone could swoop in, live away and swoop in and then get a lot of attention because they're not there very often. I think I found that attractive if I'm really being like Freudian about it. But yeah, I mean, honestly, just TV. I'm trying to think of the first comedy, like a book with like Janine Garofalo and Ben Stiller, reading it and just thinking, there's this really, I just wanted to be around those sort of people too, not saying that I, again, don't have lifelong best friends but it's like, I knew that there were people that had the different kind of priorities or wanted to just, I don't know, be creative. And in saying that, though, I didn't know enough that, I could go to college for like theater or something artistic. Wasn't even in the conversation. I literally went and got a marketing degree because my brother got an accounting degree. And that my dad said, well, if you got to get a business degree to make money. And it was like, okay, well, marketing seems the most creative of the business degrees. I'll go with that. It wasn't even a conversation. You know what I mean? So,
but you didn't realize that marketing was the more creative one. But your head still had this magnetized creative sense. Even like, okay, if you're giving me these choices, I still want to pick the most creative of the choices you're giving me. Okay.
Right. Yeah. And looking back now, I'm like, I want to beat up my guidance counselor, but I don't even know who it was. But that's telling. But
you just mentioned something, and it triggered something. And I hope I'm not out of line here saying this. But you mentioned you suffer from extreme separation anxiety for quite some time in your childhood. You were popular in high school in which you had very different social friends, and then you just mentioned, I just kind of wanted to be around people. I kind of wanted people interested in me. I wanted to make sure people were around me to be interested in me. Is you being funny, the reason that you've developed this sense of humor out of a fear of being alone, and maybe just if you can making somebody laugh, even if they're a complete stranger, they'll gravitate more towards you versus like relating to them like in a sad way or an angry way. It's like kind of like your brain almost like somehow figured out that if I can be funny and relatable funny, I will never have to be alone. Is that on point and not out of line?
I mean, how many of your interviews end in weeping, Mark? I'm not sure. No, I'm kidding. No. So first of all, that's super interesting and probably super, super fucking valid. I haven't really thought about it, but absolutely. I mean, it's funny because I think about even different challenges I dealt with growing up and or dealing with being overweight or dealing with, different social things. I had a long-term high school boyfriend who would sometimes like me and then not like me. And it's like, I think I just became very, grew up in the 80s and 90s of like diet culture and all these things. And now it's the one thing where someone said to me later in life, one of my friends was like, here you're always, even the way you dress on stage, I'd wear a snowsuit or a tent or a poncho if I could, because I just don't want anyone to look at me. But once I knew I could win them over by what I said, and so as long as I had that opportunity, they would never feel sorry for me, and they would never want to. If there were two buses and I was on one bus, people would want to come on my bus because I offered something of value. You know what I mean? So maybe it does come back to a fear of being alone. Yeah. Oh, that's terrifyingly valid.
Well, just a quick plug and we'll get right back to the show. Have you checked out my website, markstod.com? It gives you a whole wealth of information on how to see me live at shows. You can catch past Get to the Joke episodes and bonus content, and you can also check out some stand-up videos for myself. Please check out my website. Again, that's markstod.com, markstaud.com. Come see me live. Also, please, once again, subscribe to this channel, like our videos, leave a comment. I'll get back to you. Now let's get back to the joke. And that kind of brings in the question, kind of like, your jokes and your self-image and kind of, how do you perceive yourself? Because, the one joke that I love, and it's not one that you sent me, and I don't know if we'll be able to include it because I don't know if it exists on a medium where I can use it, but is the one where you find the donut crunch berry in your boot, and your boyfriend's there, and you're like, you call it like yourself a garbage human being or something like that. It's just a great joke because I think, and the reason why, and kind of going back to the first thing I mentioned about why I respect you so much as a comic is I have never been in a situation where anything like that. But I've been in similar situations and relate completely to what you're saying. So it's like, it's a very relatable joke, even though that's never happened to me. So like, do you kind of poke fun? Do you kind of mean the things when you poke fun yourself? Do you kind of mean those things, or just kind of like, these are just kind of things I say to kind of disarm the audience, to kind of be like, like, hey, like I can make fun of myself. It's an easy way to kind of lure them in versus like, I'm, giving yourself like all these kudos and kind of coming off arrogant. Is it easier to be self-deprecating, or is that actually how you feel about yourself? Some of the things that you say.
Oh, it is my DNA. I mean, well, I always would joke about that because it's there's such a dichotomy with, I think, a lot of comedians too, where it's like, I always say, like, I have the self-esteem of like an animal wearing a cone one day and the next day that of a queen, but it depends on who I'm around and what I'm dealing with, and the self-deprecation, it's such a safety, but I cannot say enough though that I also find it to be so funny. I think self-deprecating humor is so funny when it's done well and it doesn't cause the when it sort of when it works and you have enough moxie to sell it, know. And but again, it's like that. It's I think of it as a shield a lot of like to the audience. And when you first start, you're great stand up. When it's like you start, you absolutely. And when you start, you like you're like I'm in my head, I'm like, I see a crowd and I'm like, oh, I hate them. I hate everything about them. And then right before I go in, I'm like, please let them like me. Please let them like me. And then like when I'm on stage, I'm like, well, you know what? In my brain, I'm like, with my jokes, I'll hate myself first and they won't even be able to get close to that. So like if I hate myself for them and before they hate me, then I'm fine. They can't hurt me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned a number of times now about this shield. I had this shield in front of me. Whether you're talking about in your pharmaceutical job or being on stage, the shield is almost like a barrier and the way in my head when you mention it. But at the same time, your jokes tell me a lot about yourself. You don't tell very Jerry Seinfeld jokes. You don't tell kind of jokes. Like I know a lot about you when you get off the stage. So there really isn't a shield, really. Because do you make it a point to kind of, when you, and we're going to get into this, which is the meat of how you develop jokes, but do you kind of make it a point to be like, I want to make myself as vulnerable as I can when I write, so that I can find these flaws or these kind of things that I can kind of poke fun about myself? Is there a cognizant effort to kind of like really self-examine yourself for kind of like these weak spots in your body armor, and kind of like then reveal them up front before the crowd can figure it out, kind of thing?
Yeah, I have to say, I wish it was intentional. I don't think it's a cognizant thing. I think it's more selfish. I think it goes back to the fact that deep down, I do like me, and I think these quirks and those sorts of things are funny, and I need that, what is it, affirmation, confirmation that, that, and then when I learned that relatability, like when people are like, oh, I'm a monster too, I eat pizza and Oreos in my bed too, that it almost like it's a way to create a quick bond. I mean, I think I like the vulnerability only because, again, if I go there first, nobody has any, I have no skeletons. It's like, I can be, let me tell you how I'm the grossest, and then you decide if you like me or not. Hopefully you will, I don't know.
Now, are in that kind of spirit of vulnerability, are there things that are off limits? Like if you're, for instance, maybe your mom did something completely crazy when you were little, or your dad, or something you experienced that was maybe even considered traumatic. Are there things on stage, and you can get into them if you want to, or not get them if you want to, but are there things that come to your mind, like there could be something here, but I'm not ready, I'm not at that stage of maturity yet in my comedy to address these things? Are there those kind of things, or is anything on the table?
I think anything's on the table. I really don't have any off limits stuff. It's it's sad that I don't have any deep sort of things like that. One thing that I never talked about, and I chose not to, was when I was in pharmaceuticals, I never talked about my job or the industry or anything like that out of fear of getting fired. But that was like the only, and then even after I was gone, it was more like my loyalty to, the career that supported me enough to start stand up. I felt an obligation to leave it alone. But not really anything off limits. I mean, I'm sure there probably are some things if we were to dig with maybe, maybe a couple things, but nothing crazy. Nothing that I'm actively working to leave out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because what was I gonna say here? Because when I mentioned like how do you see yourself? Because I would think that you would have to have a very high opinion of yourself, or very confident of yourself, because I see how you are on stage, and despite what you say, there is a confidence in there. And I can think of a direct point when I was at your album recording, and a joke didn't hit the way you wanted to, and you go, "Fuck that! I'm telling that joke again. It's my album recording." Like, I would have just kept going because I'm just too meek and a coward. But you're like, "Fuck this! This is my only time to do it." Like I'm not gonna just squander this opportunity. So there is like this. You do have this kind of unforgiving quality about yourself. Like, I'm going to put out my best self on stage every single time. I do get that perception of you. And I do get, like, the fact that, like, when you tell a joke, especially a joke when you talk about, like, finding out the pregnancy test the second it happens, and you say it makes a lot of first dates awkward. I can see, like, a lot of, people being like, I don't know if I want my parents to hear that, but you're like, I don't give a fuck. Is that kind of how you do it? Is that I don't give a fuck attitude? Everything's on the table?
Yeah, and I think so. And one of the best pieces of advice, and I don't know, I honestly think it was John McKeever. We were talking about joke writing and stuff. I know we're going to get to that, but it was talk about what makes you laugh. Yeah. And so for whatever reason, I have a bit of a dark sense of humor. There's some vulgarity in there. There's some faux pas, words and topics. But I have to think it's really funny. Yeah. And I need to make them think it's funny too. Yeah. Not because it's not that I don't care if they think it's funny. Yeah. I care very much. Yeah. But I want them to feel like I do. Yeah.
Well, I don't think that's a huge surprise that you describe your humor as dark or cynical or I guess dark and cynical, because you, at a very young age, you noticed that this little town of Albion. Yep. And the way that you saw people living their lives wasn't for you, to the fact that you moved from Albion, New York, to the 5th biggest city in the country. So I think that's not a huge surprise that you left that as soon as you left. You drove out of Albion for the last time. That Mary Radzinski was gone forever, and now this kind of new, kind of out of the ashes rises the phoenix kind of new kind of person shows up. So. No, I think, and your humor is so unique. There is no one. I mean, you said someone. I saw you said. I forget if you just told me this or I read it. I know I read someone said that they compared you to Stephen Wright. I can't compare your humor to anything, and I think that's why your talent is almost intimidating. Because no matter how much I sit here we could sit here for 48 hours, and I could have you kind of give me lessons. I don't think I'd ever be able to reach what you've accomplished because of what you've done. And that's kind of where I'm going to transition now into how you develop your material and kind of pull back the curtain. Kind of this where I kind of mine out the kind of tidbits and the tricks you kind of use, or kind of your formula to creating some of these brilliant jokes that you have. And we can, if you want to use, we can talk generally about kind of your overall writing or whatever. But if you want to specifically use the example of, I kind of want to talk about the joke you do about do you have kids? Not anymore, and that joke, because I think that's probably the one that your most popular jokes or whatever. Yeah. So if you kind of walk me through kind of how do you, especially with your very special sense of humor and unique, how do you find material? Maybe not even find it, but how does material come to you? How do you know that what you just witnessed or what conversation you just had or what situation you just happened to be in could become a joke? What goes through your head that kind of gives that match spark that could be a joke?
That joke, the do you have any kids? Not anymore joke. I remember where I was standing when I was a pharmaceutical rep, and I was in Sewell, New Jersey, and I was waiting in line with other drug reps to go back and see a doctor. And that was a point where I think I was over the sort of stereotypical Stepford wife type of whatever. And I was sitting there and I was probably just thinking about either a upcoming show or whatever, or just whatever my little fantasy dream. And this woman was like, you could tell she was uncomfortable with the silence. And she was like, so do you have any kids? And I remember thinking like, I don't want to have this chat with you. There's no reason. We're not going to be friends. I'm very happy just staying in my own head until I get out of here. And I did not say not anymore, but I remember thinking later that would have been just the most amazing response and would have gotten the outcome that I so very much desired. It would have gotten silent. I would have been back to my own state of being. I wouldn't have to talk to this vapid person. And I just remember thinking, so it's something I know, like Chip and I talk about a lot about. I am not good at sitting down and writing jokes. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm just going to sit down. It's more like I feel like I have a heightened sense of what's going on around me a lot in order to find, without sounding corny, find the funny. Yeah. And so I just, my favorite jokes of my own, if you will, are, I'm going to sound like such a, like I didn't put any work in, but they're things that happened to me where all I had to do was tweak something or add a misdirection or, and it was like, oh, like, it's almost, I like when calamity or things happen because it gets me a new joke, because I sometimes I don't, and that's why this last year has been so trying because it's been, I always feel inspired when I'm traveling or I like observing. And now I've been in my fucking apartment. You know what I mean? So it really has been a direct correlation to my lack of just not feeling like, not being able to find funny anywhere other than, and I've got a few COVID jokes. We all do. But at this point, I think we're all looking beyond that to when, life goes back to normal. I don't want to, I don't know. I'm very on the cusp of probably either a really great writing session or a meltdown.
I like that.
We'll see. Yeah.
I like that. That's a great tagline. I like that. Kind of going kind of backtracking a little bit and kind of you said, like, I don't really write things down. These things just kind of happen to me. And I can see that happen. And the joke of where you go to the gynecologist and she says, oh, you have a perfect vagina. And so.
So I was at the gynecologist. And during the exam, the middle-aged Asian female physician, she's wrist deep, giving it a good look. And she says this to me, I swear to God, she says, it's perfect. Eyes closed, it's perfect. It's like, shit, I know, right? That's what I've been trying to tell everyone. It's like the fucking Mona Lisa smile. So I asked her for a letter of recommendation. Just been attaching it to everything. Listen, I don't know what it's like when dudes go to the doctor, but I'm fairly certain it's never like, sir, your dick.
So let's use that situation as kind of like as a start off point where it's like, all right, you have a heightened sense that like this is an odd thing to say, you know, kind of it's weird kind of thing. How do you then, when you tell that joke on stage, kind of make sure that by the time you tell it, the audience is going to have, I'm talking about the first time you tell it, has somewhat of an idea that you're trying to be funny about this subject, and you're not trying to like retell a story that happened in your life. Like, what's some of the spins or stuff that, what kind of different perspectives is that you kind of like approach a joke with that kind of like not be a storyteller but be a joke teller?
Yeah, I think sometimes one of the easiest things or quick things I go to is, for example, everything's perfect. It's perfect. Thinking to myself, like, how would a normal average Joe or Joanne, hopefully, how would they respond to something like that? They and then going in the opposite direction or going in the same direction but going too far. And so those extremes for me, that is a lot of times one, again, a tool that I try to think of when I'm like, what can I do with this? How do I, because like, with that one, it's like, I know, blah, 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 blah. But that, that's ridiculous. No one would really say that. But, and so I guess just taking the normal response, because even in my head, I'm like, well, geez, thanks, kind of like a meek little whatever, but going so far with it and then going, when you think you're far enough, going a little bit further with like a letter of recommendation. You know what I mean? Because sometimes and then you'll find though that it doesn't always work. And then maybe you try the opposite, maybe you try how dare you? Or, you go a different direction or something. And so that's always something I try to think about just off the cuff because it gives you a direction. You know what I mean? So
kind of in a similar situation to when you were in the waiting room and the woman was trying to just break the silence by asking you kids, this was another situation where you kind of just gave the gynecologist maybe a canned answer, but you wished that the answer would have been what in the joke, kind of where you could be like, does this happen in men's, appointments kind of thing? Like, so there's always kind of like, you kind of always kind of like, when you are doing jokes in which you are in a situation, do you kind of always be like, how do I wish this would have went? Like if I had like if like there was no, consequences for my behavior, how would I wish this could have gone kind of thing?
Yeah,
is that fair?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, when you're in situations when you have like some of these like more observational jokes and everything or conversations, like, do you always try to make sure that that the joke comes out cynical or dark humor, or is that just the way your mind works, or is it always like, all right, Mary, I found a punchline over here, but it's not cynical. It's not dark enough. I need to make this dark. Do you kind of focus on kind of keeping to that brand that you have kind of set aside, where it's like, kind of like going back to your dad, kind of slipping one in under the radar, kind of seeing if people are, keeping people on their feet kind of thing? Do you make a conscious effort to keep your jokes in a similar cynical, dark kind of style?
I don't. I sometimes wish I could get out of it. I guess sometimes with my sense of humor, I will find something, I can't even think of an example, something silly, like just silly, ridiculous, very, very funny. And then I'll try it and I'll be like, I don't deliver it properly, or I don't know how to make that shift. Where does it go? How do I go from being dark and cynical to, it reminds me that the joke in one of the examples I would give for this was the impression of the one where the punchline is I'd like to make a joke.
I'm going to do an impression for you guys, okay? Okay. This is my impression of a drunk best man at a wedding, or A foreigner hungry for breakfast. Drunk best man at a wedding, or foreigner hungry for breakfast. I'd like to make a toast.
Yeah.
Because that's silly and stupid, and it took, the hardest thing for me was trying to fit that in to a set, but it just made me laugh. I thought it was the funniest thing I've ever heard, even though it was so stupid. And I love play on words, and I love, I remember having one, like, I thought it was going to make me famous. It was like, a new tagline for a national hotel chain. Well, if you love it so much, why don't you marry us? And I was like, I remember thinking, oh my God, that's the best thing I've ever heard. But it's so stupid. And I could never do anything with it, so it's like, I don't know. I mean, I don't intentionally stay dark and cynical, but that's probably where I'm comfortable. And that's probably, and again, the whole thing, if I think it's funny, I'm going to try it no matter what. But I usually end up coming back to home a little bit, home base, Yeah.
Well, so when you have a situation where you're in the waiting room and that conversation happens, or you're at the gynecologist and that situation happens, how do you make sure that you can remember what just, like, that, like, I don't know if you just have a really good memory, or, like, I mean, is there any way that you physically capture, like, in your phone, like, oh, shit, that was hilarious, let me get that in my phone real quick. Is there any way you capture an idea in any way? Or the best way you capture ideas, maybe?
Something like that, because I feel like they're few and far between. I'm like ruminating over it and working on it. But like that example of the vapid woman. But I have drawers full of, and I guess I didn't know what you meant in your email about that, but I have drawers full of like moleskin notebooks. And where I'll just, words written down. Now I do use my phone, the notes section. And when I am trying to make myself feel better about life, I've started in the last, I don't know, 3-4 years using like Google Docs, and I've got, and I'll add to it. And so I do note take, but it's more of a, don't forget this. And the times that I mostly use it is right before I fall asleep. Like, cause that's when my brain is sadly most awake.
Interesting.
And I feel like very, I don't know. That's when I'm trying to go to sleep. That's when I feel like I'm the most creative. I've always been kind of a night owl. And so I will come up with things or run through premises and I'll work through them in my head. And that's when I've learned I have to jot them down, even if it's in a voice memo to phone or whatever, because it's happened so many times where I'll say, I'll remember that. That's so good. How would I forget that? And then the next day it's gone. So, my memory's shit.
So put me there with you. So it's right before you go to bed. I'm just in the room, creepily watching you write it. Like, how does that work? Do you need to? Can you be with your boyfriend and go through these, or do you have to be in a separate room? Do you write? I mean, you said you had no Google Docs and that kind of thing. Like, are you actually writing out stuff, or is it more just like, kind of walk me through, you kind of like the routine that you kind of set yourself, and this right before bedtime kind of comedy mindset?
Yeah. So the Google Doc, that's a separate scenario. That's during the day. I'm gonna go through my old tweets. I'm gonna go through, and that's a big thing I do to dig for. I wouldn't say gold, but that bedtime scenario. He's there. He's asleep. He's whatever. It's just that late night. I don't know. I feel like it's
are you writing? Are you writing it out, or are you on your phone writing it out? Are you thinking in your head? I'm literally just thinking.
The other thing that goes along with that, and this is kind of gross.
That's all right. But I want to hear it.
I have the most creative time I ever am, or it's like, I have it looks like a ring light, but it's a light up magnifying mirror that I use because I am a plucker and a picker and I'm a gross person. I'm constantly
I can
playing
relate.
with my face and
Yeah.
massaging, and it's, again, nervous energy
Yeah.
and whatever. I'll lay on my stomach on my bed with a pillow under me and just maniacally try to squeeze, I don't know, love or fortune out of my pores and body.
Yeah.
And that is when I do my best thinking.
Wow.
Like, I'm literally able to think about everything. And that's when a lot of times I'll get up from there and look like a giant raspberry, the personification, and then I will write something down or put it in my notes. The Google Docs is more formal when I'm like, I get up and I have had a good night's sleep and I'm like, oh, there's some tweets or something.
Yeah.
But yeah. So it's kind of gross, isn't it, Mark?
No. This is actually very interesting. It's very interesting because, first of all, most people, I would say, and I'm not talking about just comics, most people would say that the most motivated part of their day is in the morning. So it's almost interesting to hear that right before bed is your most interesting time. And
Never. I've always been a night person.
Yeah.
Morning is, I'm garbage. Yeah.
And now this routine of you kind of like just self-care and that gives you time to kind of think over premises. And I'm trying to think about this. I'm trying to think about kind of I'm sorry, the ring, is it a ring light or is it a ring mirror?
So it's a mirror.
It's a mirror.
It's a magnifying mirror, and it lights up, and I zone off. And
does this and I might be really reaching for straws here. Is this kind of behavior kind of like is it kind of like when you go back to this self-deprecation? Are you really vulnerable at that point? Because now you're looking at yourself in the mirror after you've kind of, face scrubbed yourself and now kind of you're hard on yourself. Are you hard on yourself, Mary? You think you're harder on yourself than most human beings in your demographic?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do. I mean, but behind the scenes, like my boyfriend would attest to that, I'm sure. And I mean, I at the core, I like myself, but I really struggle with a lot of with doing that all the time.
But would you say that it kind of helps your self-deprecation because now you're in the mindset of like, I want to put these words in your mouth, but like, man, I don't look my best, and like, man, and now these really bad negative imagery about yourself is hitting you, and now it's like, is that kind? Are you almost forcing yourself to get into that mindset so that you can create A+ material?
I wish that the answer to that was yes. I think it's no. And the reason I think it's more so because I will say it's more of the Zen practice of just of like blacking out and not really doing anything that allows it's the mindlessness of that task of just I think it's the mindlessness that then allows me to just really think through things. And I've had several occasions where like I couldn't come up with a tag or I couldn't, where does this go? And it was during that act and I was like, oh my God, that's it. And I think it's because the mindless activity is just almost like Zen like to me. And it's my time. It's mommy's time. And and maybe the pressure's off, there's not a pressure of having to come up with anything in that moment or and it's so it allows for a freedom of thought, because I think a lot of the times when I'm trying to write or even just again combing tweets and getting premises and grouping things, you're like you're in it, you're like where is it, but whereas I'm not mining for anything other than my face during this scenario, and I think there's just a free flow of thought.
Now, before this session happens, do you whip out your moleskins or your phone notes and look through and say, okay, I'm about to go do and do my nighttime routine. I want to focus on this thing that happened today. And then is that kind of in your head? Do you have an agenda walking into this kind of thing, or is it kind of like no agenda, just like whatever topic, it's just boom, 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 like a pipe bomb going off in your head right then? Okay.
Yeah, maybe I should, now that we're talking about it. It might actually be more productive. But no agenda.
Interesting, because I really want to get in your head when this happens. And I think this is what separates kind of your skill versus my skill is I I can't really figure out how to kind of free myself that way. What are some of the ways, like, if you kind of can help me out here maybe a little bit, what are some of the ways that you allow yourself to be open, like, you kind of, like you said, this Zen, like, quality where you're not, like, I have to pick this angle, like, I have to do this, like, you already, it seems like almost your premises are set and you make it a point not to have a punchline until this session happens, and your punchline will come from these sessions. How do you allow yourself to be this open and kind of like non-focused, let's say? Like, how do you kind of like keep the non-focused but also focused in this kind of routine kind of environment you created?
I think it was just the frustration of I would hear friends of mine comics like, oh, I'm gonna go write. I'm gonna do 20 minutes of writing every day. And I would try that, and it just never. I just couldn't come up with anything. And also, it just didn't feel inspiring. And I know that sounds sort of like, oh, inspiring, but like it's like the feeling you get like if I'm at a hotel bar or an airport bar, just the solitude with no agenda of just staring off and thinking. I mean, I think the closest I can get to that without the mirror shtick in my everyday life right now is like a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and just like sitting on my couch staring out the window, but I'm not looking at anything. I'm just staring, and that's when I just I'll start to think about a premise or something. And then almost like thinking like, what would a really funny person say to this? Like almost thinking through like, where would that go? Or watching a movie of sorts or an audio and just let it go. Yeah. I know I sound like a crazy person.
No, you don't. No. I find all this very fascinating. I'm hanging on every word here. I guess kind of, does like when your boyfriend sees you, just kind of like stand, like does he understand that, okay, my girlfriend's working out material right now, don't buy, like, you need this kind of alone space? I know you said he's in the room with you, but like it's kind of like you wait till he's asleep. You don't, it's like you can't have distraction. You need to be able to be completely silence and focus and all this stuff. That has to be your environment in order to be creative.
I think so. Okay. And honestly, it's not even anything I've talked to him about, really. Yeah. I mean, he knows the whole mirror thing because so many times I've gotten up from doing that and I've been like, oh my God, I think this is so funny, But it's not something I really like plan for. I do think solitude for me is just being alone and away from any, and not even like distraction, but just truly like, you're just sitting in the dirty diaper, you don't have anywhere to go. You don't have a phone to look at. And you're just like, you're just processing, just hoping something. And then once you get, I don't know if you find this, but like something, whether it's a tag or again, maybe going in the different direction and trying to cut. Once I get a nugget or something that I think could work, then it sort of builds on itself, know, but it takes a while to get the first thing.
Yeah. Well then if you finally find that oh my God moment, how do you capture that? Like, this is stage good. Do you then run to that Google Doc and throw it in there, or your Moleskine, throw it in there so you don't forget it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Because and it's rare though, because not every decent thought would I get up and run, but you just know when it's like, oh, that's it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So, and then, all right. So, if you don't mind, do you have like a recent example of something that you can kind of walk, like maybe something that like maybe from last night's session that you can kind of like walk me through in real time? Kind of thing, like, hey, I had this. Yesterday morning, my boyfriend didn't put the syrup away properly, or something weird. Like, can you kind of walk me through kind of something very recent, so that it's fresh in your mind? And kind of walk me through kind of how your mind worked, like with like the different directions it went with an idea, and even it didn't turn out to be funny. Can you just kind of walk me through a fresh idea?
I have a one from last night, and it's not funny, so buckle up.
It's all right.
Prepare yourself. But for whatever reason, I don't know how I started thinking about it. I just thought it was an interesting premise. Like coming out of COVID, I don't know if it was a commercial or something, but I'm finding myself, like many people are, just like seeing very mediocre and mundane scenarios, but like yearning for them. For example, like this literally was just the thought that I had last night. I thought, could maybe go to something. And it's funny. I don't know if I have it. I'm going to see what I wrote in my notes, because I know I put it on my phone. I just said, my standards are way down after COVID. Now I just want to sit at an Applebee's bar for a happy hour by myself. It's not funny.
Yeah.
But the point was that I had such high hopes for myself. You know, I thought I was such a like interesting person, and that now the idea of just like, you know, McDonald's drive-through without a mask makes me want to slide off my seat. You know what I mean? Like, and it's not, again, it's a half premise. It's not even there, but that was. I
can definitely see the legs. Like, I definitely, as Chip Chantry says, the seed of it starting to sprout. But can you kind of walk me through the different iterations? Because, you know, I guess let me ask you this question first. I think I might know the answer. I don't want to maybe step on it, but like, why Applebee's? Why is it Applebee's? Why is it not Ruby Tuesdays or Texas or you know, why is it Red Lobster or Maggiano's? Why Applebee's?
Okay, because I saw in my Facebook feed within the last week a girl from high school that at the time I think she was sort of like, this, you know, fawned over and stuff, and it had a picture of her hand with a couple tats on it and her boyfriend's hand and with like a blue goldfish type shitty alcoholic drink, and it was like date night Applebee's happy hour or something like that. And I remember thinking like, that's so amazing that's where she ended up. And it's judgy, it's me being a total twat and thinking I'm better than somebody. In my brain, it was just like, boy, you know?
So I'll tell you this, having not known this high school friend of yours with that, the image I get and why I think Applebee's is perfect is because Applebee's is a stereotypical kind of like low, kind of like, it's like the lowest, it's like the lowest of the dine-in kind of restaurants. You're setting a scene, and this is why I think like Applebee's is usually kind of like the one you're like, it's a cheap date night. It's kind of like it's a rough kind of like it sets a scene. Like that's why I was asking like why you chose Applebee's versus like, you know, frickin' Capitol Grill, because it's a whole different atmosphere.
Well, it's funny because the two, now that I guess I went too far with including, maybe I shouldn't use that example, seeing that, but the two that I thought of was Chili's, because I like Chili's once in a while.
Oh, I like Applebee's, and I like it for the same reason you do. I like slumming it. That's kind of where I'm comfortable.
Yeah, you know. But it's funny. I thought about Chili's, and then my next thought, franchise-wise, was my absolute favorite franchise bar scenario would be an Outback steakhouse with a bloomin' onion. But then I was like, that's too nice. It's just not shitty enough. Like, you know what I mean? Even though it's not, you know, it's
you were about to make an apology for using Applebee's. What was that? You almost did. Why? What was about to happen there? You're like, I shouldn't maybe use Apple. Well, what was that about? Because it's fine to use Applebee's. Or is there something?
No, I was saying about the friend example. I don't know. Like, now I feel like a bad person because I said that out loud.
All right, so interesting. So kind of now to get to the, I really like that. That's a great, I like where did you kind of, how, do you know how long it took you to get to that short eight worded premise, or even a little seed, let's say, of a joke?
Yeah, I mean, maybe 5-10 minutes.
Wow, okay.
I think a lot before that, I have been swirling around the thought of my longing to just. I said to like Mark, I love my Mark. He's we're in this apartment, we're quarantining together, but I'm like, I just want to I'd go to a dump hotel by myself for just like a day.
Yeah.
I just want to be alone.
Yeah.
In which is, for people who are alone, they just want to be with people. And here I haven't seen anyone I know or love, but I still just want to be alone.
Yeah.
But just thinking about like all the cool things I used to look forward to doing. I probably won't even, I'm going to be real basic, you know? And so I've been thinking about that a lot lately,
like it.
that it wouldn't take much for me to be,
Well, everyone can relate, because everyone has, I mean, I was like, I'm going to read more now in quarantine, and now I can totally relate to just like, I want the frickin' dollar margaritas at Applebee's. So I get it. I'm on board with that premise, because it's so relatable. Okay. Now, kind of like, now, when you kind of go back, if you can kind of now backtracking to kind of like the not anymore joke or the gynecologist joke, when you told that joke for the first time on stage, and I am sure it's a far cry from where it was on your album, how do you go about then editing and taking into effect kind of like how the audience perceive? First of all, like how you know, I guess the first question is, how many times do you try out what was in your head before you're like, I need to redo it, and then how do you redo it?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot luck and perseverance, because I do think that there have been times where, like the not anymore joke, I'm trying to think, what did I used to have, if I had a tag with that, or do I have a tag
and
with
by the
that?
way, you're not chained to those jokes. You can use any joke that would pertain to that question.
Oh, yeah. No, that was one challenge that I identified early on with self-deprecating humor in particular, was that there were a lot of potential outcomes based, and I didn't realize that it was based on how I delivered it. Because if I have told that joke, for example, the not anymore, you know, where people have been, the response, there's always some dumb bitch up front who's like, you know, and that's when I get really kind of self-righteous, like, you have no idea the self-esteem I have to be up here, you know, like, you know, like, it's kind of like, it's a weird thing. But that, I think, I guess, because to me it's a two-parter, because it's the joke itself. Is it funny? Does it work? And then also, I do not, with self-deprecating humor and some dark things, I don't want the awe and the pity and it needs to be delivered in a way that is funny, which I learned over the years can only be done if you're really owning it and confident, you know. But I mean, I'm trying to think of some other jokes where you just keep going with it because you really like it, but it just never works. And I have notebooks of, you know, misfit jokes, you know, that have never seen the light of day or more than once or twice where I just couldn't do it again. Yeah. But I don't know if I have a real practice of like X number of times. It's more like go with my gut, like, you know. But do you record yourself every time you tell jokes? I never have recorded myself. You never record yourself. That's amazing, actually. I mean, it tells to your intellect that you can. I mean, gosh, that's amazing. No. I applaud you. Oh God, no, I can't, because I don't know. When I say never have, I may have, but I've never listened to it. Like I've never done audio. The only thing I do is I'll have my phone and I have to start the time. The time clock, because I'm too anxious to know, to feel comfortable if I've gone long enough or too long. But I feel like, have you ever felt this way? If you do a set, I can then go and lay down, and again, you have that adrenaline, and I can almost replay it verbatim, whether it's a slight stumble of words, or I can go back through and I'll remember the response to something. Interesting. Well, no, I can't relate. But I guess let me ask you, like, how prepared are you when you tell a joke for the first time on stage? Or do you have it all written out ahead of time, or a bullet point itinerary, or do you take a premise like the one with Applebee's and develop it on stage? How do you kind of work out the material for the first time? In the past, I would say over, you know, I've been doing this, 10 plus years, like over the first half of doing stand-up, I wouldn't say anything without it being typed up, written out, worked through, because it very, very rule bound. And then when I started working with Sarah Colonna, she would have me open for her. She would say, "Oh, well, yeah, I'm working on this thing." She's like, you write on stage. And I remember being like, "What are you talking about? You monster. How do you sleep? How do you not leave a trail of diarrhea from your hotel room to the, And she was like, "No," but then I would watch her do it. And I would see her bail on a premise. And then I thought, oh, okay, there's a freedom. You don't have to go through with it, if it's not working at all. But lately, in the last, not counting this past year, I have been more open to working through some premises on stage. In fact, I probably did at Punchline. I was trying some newer bits. I'm getting more comfortable with that. My writing is not as tight, and it's funny. I did a Zoom show.
I saw
a few
it.
weeks
I
ago.
didn't see it, but I saw the ad for it. Yeah.
And my boyfriend, whatever, plugged in, and I was like, "Well, how was it?" And he doesn't like any awkward pauses. So for him, anything Zoom is already 2 thumbs down. But I'm like, "Well, I was okay, right?" And he's like, "You can tell you weren't really prepared, but no, it was fine." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "Well, yeah." He's like, "You say yourself wandering through tweets and premises," and I was like, "Fuck you," But I also thought, well, I want to be a little looser, but maybe that's just being lazy.
But you do write, though. I mean, you're having these sessions in your bed with the mirror, and you are writing these kind of like enlightening punchlines. So do you review that then? Like, I mean, you're not writing out jokes, but that maybe the moleskin or your phone or whatever, are you reviewing that then as part of before you get on stage? It's like, hey, here's like a laundry list of things I want to go over tonight.
Well, and again, for example, we're doing another show in a couple weeks. Between now and then, I will sit down and gather my notes from my phone. Excuse me, my notebooks, any index cards I have laying around, and I will try to compose some sort of skeleton of a joke, or at the very least, print out a bunch of things that I think could work. But I don't do that enough. I need to sit down and spend an hour every day just sort of cultivating this, but I don't.
But you said it doesn't work for you, and I think that's what the point of this is that every comic has their own style and what's the best fit. It's sitting down and even Pat House, one time, talking to a friend of mine, and he said he was going to write at a bar. He's like, "Good luck with that. Let me know how much you write or whatever, because you're not going to write in a bar. Like, it's not going to work out for you." And so, so kind of like going back to kind of, when you're on stage, what are some of when you're working a joke out on stage and you have the kind of the premise, how do you work out a joke on stage? I have never, all my stuff, it's like a transcript before I get up there. So how do you work? I mean, do you almost have a formula? Like, here's the premise. Okay, now I want to take, the first thing I'm going to do is the opposite direction. Now I'm going to take it too far. It's like, do you have a certain checklist of how you're going to develop a joke on stage and kind of see which one the audience gears in more? Or kind of walk me through that kind of your mindset when you want to work something out on stage, just from a premise.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, so I wish I did those things that I talked about earlier. I don't. If I can get the chutzpah, the balls to actually get out of the classic tried and true jokes and try a new thing. I usually say, for example, the Applebee, God, when's the last time I tried a new joke on an actual stage? But I would just come out with it. And a lot of times this is just see what happens. Or I go back to when someone said to me once about crowd work. So this will hopefully make sense, is that I was terrified of crowd work. I was terrified of interacting with the audience. I didn't want to make too much eye contact because I didn't want to solicit anything from them. But someone once said, well, don't worry. You don't have to say something really, really funny. You just have to say what you would normally say to someone. If someone up front's like, oh, blah, 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 you don't have to be like, but well, you know, with this big punchline, you just be like, oh, really? Well, how long you been doing, you know? And then something will go somewhere. So when I would work out jokes with premises in that vein, it would be just getting the premise out, maybe throwing some, like, to see if there's any reaction, and then just like playing off it or seeing where I naturally go without a lot of prep, which is probably not great.
No, that's okay. No, that's all right. No, it's helpful then. And you know, the way your jokes are very, I would say, like, short, and they're not one-liners, but they're, you know, like you have so many jokes that you pack into an hour. It's almost incredible and overwhelming to even think about. But you have to have some kind of editing, just because human nature, we're very wordy because we want to get our point across. So we usually give people too much. So how do you kind of work? If I'm not sure if that's you or not, but I'm just most people.
Oh yeah.
Like how do you kind of work back the wordiness? Okay, now you have a premise that people are relating to, and people are now chuckling at certain parts. How do you kind of walk back this editing to kind of keep it in that tight 4 or 5 line kind of joke that you've kind of established now as kind of like a way of writing now for you?
Yeah, and honestly, just trimming fat to the point of if it's not, you know, oh, if you don't need it, get rid of it. Easier said than done. But just dense, you know? I mean, but then I fall into a struggle with that, with wanting to be a little bit more storytelling when a little bit longer bits. And I feel like it's almost like without the parameters of the setup punch, or blah, blah, misdirection, blah, you know, that I do tend to ramble and be too wordy. So I think I sort of gravitate towards those very simple structures that, you know, not because I'm good at it, but because I know what to do. It's like the recipe a little bit. For the joke,
you're great, you're great at it, to be honest. I wish I had the skills there, but that gravitation, but I mean, how do you identify fat? Let's say, how do you identify fat? Because when you tell a joke and some of it gets laughs and some of it doesn't, how do you differentiate between what's setup and what's filler? Because you already know what the punchlines are. That's what people are laughing at. But how do you differentiate between, like, the setup that the audience needs to make the punchline make sense and the fat? How do you know the difference?
I think a lot of going into that, a lot of those shorter jokes, the setup punches, I would try them out as tweets first.
Okay.
And so that's been a huge, definitely for my more one-liner jokes, or like the joke where I was at the hairdresser and the lady announced she was 37 weeks today, and I congratulated her on her sobriety. Like that sort of thing. Those all were tweets, and they all came from scenarios, you know, like I was at the hairdresser and this woman said that, and in my brain, I congratulated her on her sobriety. I didn't really, though. I wished I had, because she was obnoxious, and nobody gives a shit. Dogs get pregnant every minute, you know. But so I think the Twitter universe has back when, because I don't know, is it limited now to the characters, or did they expand it? I honestly don't know.
I am very bad with Twitter, so I'm not the one to ask.
But I used Twitter as a first run through for short one-liner jokes, and so if it would do well, I would just try it on stage as is. If not, I would add whatever I needed to make it more conversational. And honestly, I think that's the simplicity and the truth of how I ended up with so many shorter jokes, was doing it that way. So there really wasn't much trimming, because they just started that short, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's brilliant. It really is. And so I want to kind of talk about then your delivery of a joke, because when you're on stage, you're very calm, you're confident, you don't raise your voice, you don't do characters, you don't, you know, you pretty much don't move within the whole hour or whatever from the spot that you come on stage with. How deliberate are you? Now, I know that's probably a lot. I'm sure if I met your father, I'm sure that's, you know, kind of like the same kind of demeanor. but like how intentional are you to make sure you don't go too act outy or too like in your face? Like, is that intentional to always kind of be this kind of stoic kind of personality on stage, or is that just how there's no thought process to your delivery?
If anything, I'm trying to be more energetic.
Okay.
I remember when I first started, it was that Stephen Wright comic.
Yeah.
They were like, and I'll never forget a local
Stephen
comic.
Wright's too far on the other end. You're not Stephen Wright either.
And I remember doing an open mic one time, and a more veteran Philly comic was like, "Man, you got no energy. You gotta jazz it up here." You know,
I love that stuff. I love when they do that.
Look where they are now.
Yeah.
No, they're but it's funny because I like deadpan.
Mm-hmm.
My goal was not to be so like a shtick.
Yeah.
I think I'm getting closer to my normal self on stage now. I'm hoping. I mean, I think that's the goal of any comic. I think in the beginning it was like, how do you tell a joke like this? But it's definitely, I'm not trying to not move around or raise my voice or anything. It's a matter of like comfortability. Like I've done like a little like sketch thing, or you do something on film and someone's like, yell this, and I'm like, hey, like I do not like to look silly or be made fun of when I'm not comfortable. I'm not theatrical. I'm not. So that's why I improv comics and improv and the whole improv world. I look at it with pure just admiration and respect for being able to be so loose and open, because to me, I would rather be curb stomped.
Oh, that's funny. That's really funny. I guess let me kind of go back to this tweet. How do you come up with your tweets? They are brilliant. Even the one today I was laughing at or whatever. It's like, they are brilliant. You know, are these? I think you've mentioned this interview that you mentioned that they are kind of spontaneous to a point or whatever. But I don't know if I believe that, because they are worded so well. Kind of, what is your tweeting like every day? I got to come up with one, or what is kind of like the genesis of a tweet? Kind of like, how do you? Is something from your notebooks like before, like the mirror situation? Like, is that something? If I see a tweet, can I now know after this conversation, like, oh, this was something that Mary talked into her mirror about last night? Is that something from there?
That is funny. Yeah, mirror on the wall. It's funny. I just looked at my tweet from today, because I'm like, what did I tweet? Because I'll go through dry spells. I think it's like anything else where, number one, if something in the world happens, like go back to the not anymore, that happened in a day. That was an immediate tweet from my parked car, whatever. But like even, for example, I tweeted something about wanting to quit Facebook. And how would I be able to say happy birthday to all my family? That was something last night. I tweeted it at 2 a.m. because that's my prime time. And it was just that, I've seen that for a long time. We see that. And it just occurred to me how silly it was. And I felt the need to, now mind you, I won't put that on Facebook because I don't want to offend the friends and family who do that. You know what I mean? It'll be thoughts that are in my phone, or a lot of times though, it is kind of just in the moment, you know, because I can tell nobody's combing the dates of my tweets, but I feel like I'll have a day with like 4 or 5 like tweets I feel like were fire, and then I'll go 5 days without with radio silence, and it is really based on if I'm jazzed up or observing or interesting.
Okay. All right, because like I said, I'm terrible at tweeting, so I was trying to see how you did it so I could copy. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, do the same as me.
I want to talk about your album in the last few minutes here. And first of all, can I ask you a question? What was the how did you know it was ready for you to do an album? When did you go? I'm sure you've been approached before to do one, but when was it like I'm ready? Get me, because you didn't. It wasn't self-produced. You did it through Helium, correct?
Actually, it was self-produced,
Oh, okay.
and then Helium. I was the last one before Helium got set up to record and do this, and then after the fact, they actually bought the rights from me, which whatever that means, so that it is within a Helium thing now. But I did it myself.
Okay. Yeah.
I was ready to be done with some of those jokes.
Okay.
I thought they were good jokes, and it was kind of like, you think of like, oh, I want to have this like catalog of, this something.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how else better to do that. So, and also it helped, I mean, Pat House had an album. I'd seen the journey. I'd seen what people did and how they did it. But I still right now, I mean, that album, I don't know, it ended up being like 50 minutes.
I mean, it was named one of the top 10 albums of 2019. The album's no schlub. It's a perfect album.
Well, thank you. I have to say that is probably one of the things I am most proud of. I don't like to watch myself. I don't like to listen to myself, but I can actually listen to my album and I'll smile. I'm not embarrassed.
Yeah.
I like it.
Good.
And that is a really good feeling. And also very lucky, since I only had one show recording to get it. A lot of people will do more than one. But yeah, I was just ready to, well, it's also, I had a lot of jokes that were, pushing 8, 9, 10 years. You're talking about being single and all these things. And I've been with my boyfriend for 7 years now. So it was just kind of like, I'm ready to go to round 2.
Did it represent because you said you've been doing comedy for 12 years and the album's 2 years old. So did it represent a milestone of, here's 10 years worth of my work, almost like this is your dissertation of all the research I've done, like how doctors come up with their theories and papers and all that. This is the comedian's version of that. Would that kind of where you are if you were to drop dead the next day? At least people have this to remember you by, and all the hard work that encompasses that hour.
I think so. Yeah. Okay. I think I didn't, going into it, I don't know if I thought of it like that, but I feel that way now. And I didn't know if I would be proud with the final product. And I think I am, I mean, I think you're always growing with this type of thing, but yeah, I feel like if anything, I'm Googleable.
The thing I want to end on is when someone asked you in an interview about why did you choose the name Discomfortable for your album, and you said that this is a quote, it is a punchline of mine, a joke I really like. It's about my boyfriend and how he's smarter than I am. Smarter in air quotes. I screw up words. I'm close, but I'm always a hair off. An example of this: one time I was joking and told boyfriend to keep his beef hooks off of me and what I meant was meat hooks. So, and then so kind of going full circle now back to the beginning of our conversation, where we talk about this Mary Radzinski from a small town in New York who kind of had a hard time trying to maybe fit in, but always was popular, but struggled maybe with weight or with self-esteem issues or detachment from other issues. Is this the way you describe yourself in here, this being always a hair off, is this almost, instead of being, I kind of see what you're trying to answer the question as, it's kind of like, hey, I'm just like a little off and I'm just kind of poking fun at that. But is this your competitive advantage to being a great comic? The fact that you are this you're slightly different than maybe mainstream, from like those Stepford people that we've talked about, kind of the people that maybe were your clients in your day job or whatever. What is it? Is the benefit, looking back, instead of this being a weakness of yours where it's like, hey, maybe I say the wrong word and maybe I was made fun of in the past about this, is this now like, this is now the album title of my jokes. Like, I have an album now that Helium bought the rights of because of a word that I mispronounced. So fuck you, it's hilarious. Is that is this kind of now kind of like just this maybe thing that was always something that you looked in at yourself as a negative is now kind of defined you in Philadelphia comedy as a positive?
Oh shit, Mark, it's gonna after this conversation. No, I mean, I think you are onto something. I mean, I hope so. You know, I feel like yeah, a little bit of a fuck you. Because like that's the other thing. With Discomfortable and that joke and the time period of my life, I think it's a reflection of being an adult, but being someone who spent a whole childhood into adulthood just fucking stuff up. And just, again, I'm close, but being able to laugh about it is what has given me sort of the one up, you know? So, yeah, I like that. I'm going to go with what you said. Okay. Yeah, well, for sure.
Mary, thank you so much. Thank you for your 2+ hours of your time. I hope it went by. That was my goal, and I appreciate everything. So.
Thank you so much.
No, I appreciate it. No, the honor's over on this side of the screen.
No, your questions and just your thoughtfulness and your I mean, like that. I'm so humbled that someone had to waste their time reading articles about.
If I whatever. I wouldn't have picked you if I didn't feel like you were someone I admire or that's interesting. So I wanted to get to even know more and also find out what makes you such a great comic. So no, I appreciate you kind of opening the curtain a little bit for me to peek in. So
yeah, you're the best. Well, thank you so much.
You, Mary.
And when we do get to see each other in person, don't just say hi and then go back in the corner. I'm going to call you on it.
Thanks a lot, you guys. Enjoy the rest of the show.
All right, that's our interview with Mary. I know I had a great time talking to her. I know you had a great time listening to Mary. Please check her out at a comedy club near you. Also, check out her comedy album, Discomfortable. And once again, if you enjoyed this interview and other interviews that I've done, please subscribe to this channel, like our videos, leave a comment, and see me live at a show by going to my website, markstod.com. All right, till next time, I'm Mark Stoudemire.